The war between the United States, Israel and Iran is entering its second week, with military operations intensifying across the region. Israeli strikes have continued to target sites inside Iran, including areas around the capital Tehran, while Tehran has responded with missile and drone attacks, raising concerns about a wider regional escalation. Meanwhile, Iran has announced that Mojtaba Khamenei will take over as the country's new supreme leader, following the killing of his father Ayatollah Ali Khamenei in earlier strikes. So what do these recent developments mean for the region and for the trajectory of the war? Let's continue our special extensive coverage. Iran has named cleric Mojtaba Khamenei as the country's new supreme leader, following the death of his father Ali Khamenei, who was killed during the opening phase of the ongoing US and Israeli strikes on Iran. The decision came after a vote by the Assembly of Experts, the 88-member clerical council responsible under Iran's constitution for choosing the nation's supreme leader. Mojtaba Khamenei, a 56-year-old cleric, has never held former government office, but is believed to have held significant influence behind the scenes. He survived the recent military strikes on Iran. With his appointment, Mojtaba Khamenei becomes the third supreme leader in the history of the Islamic Republic, succeeding his father Ali Khamenei. The Israeli military says it carried out a new wave of airstrikes targeting sites linked to Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. The strikes reportedly hit several bases and facilities, including an IRGC police headquarters and a command center in the city of Isfahan used by the group's internal paramilitary force. In its latest operational update, the Israeli military said the attacks were part of what it described as a phase aimed at deepening the damage to the core systems and foundations of the Iranian regime. It also said its forces struck a rocket engine production facility and multiple launch sites for long-range ballistic missiles. Lebanon's state-run national news agency reports a series of Israeli airstrikes on Beirut's southern suburbs, including areas between the neighborhoods of Ghobeiri and Haret Hareik, as well as the Safir district. The latest attacks follow several days of Israeli bombardment in southern Beirut, after the Israeli military said it was striking Hezbollah targets in the Lebanese capital amidst escalating regional tensions. The escalation has prompted evacuation warnings in parts of the southern suburbs and caused widespread displacement as civilians flee areas expected to be targeted. And to help us unpack these developments, we're joined by Professor P.L. De Silva, a political science and strategic studies professor, and Dr. Mohammed Osman, an international relations specialist. Thank you very much both for joining us and for your time. We start off with Professor De Silva. The war between the United States, Israel, and Iran is now entering its second week, with continued strikes reported across Iranian territory. From your perspective, how significant is this latest escalation, and what does it indicate about where the conflict may be heading?
Right. So what is happening is actually quite concerning for US military planners. And the reason is that the interceptor arsenal is actually depleting very fast. They already started from a fairly low position, and uh, and actually the United States top expert on missiles and missile defense is Professor Theodore Postol. He's a professor of nuclear science and international security at MIT. And he said that the biggest fraud that has been committed over the last 35 years is the fraud about missile defense. In his learned opinion, and he unpacked it in a few hours ago, is that there is no ability for the Patriot system or the THAAD system or the Arrow, which are basically high altitude, long range, and the David Sling, which is medium range, and the Iron Dome, which is short range, that none of these are actually hitting their targets. And the explosions that you hear is actually the missile warhead going up. When there is a really large flash, that's when there's actually an interception. And he said this is a continuation of a pattern that happened during the Iraq War when there were zero Scud missiles that were hit. So the percentage is very low, and therefore it is almost impossible to hit a bullet with a bullet. I mean, he gave a very technical explanation. I will not go into that. But that's something that we need to understand that.
Sir, who gave a technical explanation that you did not understand? Could you further elaborate, please?
Right. So it's Professor Theodore Postol. He's professor of nuclear science and international security at MIT. He went into great detail. I think we shouldn't confuse the audience by
The
going
viewers.
into much technical detail. So I'll tell you in shorthand. It's basically that the American missile industry, have sold the Patriot, 3 and the THAAD and all of these systems to the Gulf countries and have also given Israel, but it's not actually protecting these countries from incoming missiles. And that's the problem. And therefore, the situation, in his opinion, is very dire. The war is going on, and it's not going to be pretty. Now, his main concern, and that's something that should concern all of us, and these are his words. He said that, in his opinion, Netanyahu is a homicidal maniac, and that he can use a nuclear weapon on Iran, a tactical nuclear device. If things
Got your
get
point, sir. I'll leave it there and I'll be back again. Dr.
okay,
Osman. Iran has now named Mojtaba Khamenei as the country's new supreme leader following the killing of his father Ayatollah Ali Khamenei and earlier strikes. How could this leadership transition reshape Iran's strategy in the ongoing war, sir?
Thank you for having me, Rana. Greetings to you and to your guest. It seems, of course, Iran is witnessing now, with the change of leadership or the selection of the new leadership, the new supreme leader, a historical development in the trajectory and the history of the Iranian regime. The 1970, the Islamic Republic, which has been established in 1979, as it witnessed only that its third supreme leader ever in its history since the toppling of the Shah back in 1979. And of course, the selection of the new supreme leader poses a lot of questions about the nature of the regime in Iran, its stability, and even its internal integrity before the Iranian public, it seems, because for the first time, Iran is back to a hereditary form of succession, meaning that Mojtaba Khamenei succeeded his father, Ali Khamenei, as the supreme leader of Iran. The man never held any public office throughout his career, even though he's a 56-year-old. He is a cleric indeed. However, he's only a Hujjat al-Islam. He is not an Ayatollah. He is not a seasoned reference point or jurist with extended experience so that he can be eligible, really, to become the supreme leader of Iran, referring to him yesterday in the public statements as Ayatollah Mojtaba Khamenei does not make him an Ayatollah clerically, Rana. So of course it poses a lot of questions. However, and of course this will indeed might potentially even undermine the legitimacy of the regime further before significant segments of the Iranian public. However, of course, at times of war, I think these arguments and considerations will be postponed. What we are concerned with right now is how Mojtaba Khamenei will lead Iran vis-a-vis its war with the United States and Israel. At the moment, of course, Iran is being subjected to a war of aggression led by the United States and Israel. President Trump really was counting on having a new leadership in Iran, having a change from within the regime.
Dr. Osman, sorry to interrupt you, but Donald Trump made clear that and announced that he is not happy with the new leadership.
Yes, yes, I was getting to that. Yes. So what happened here is that President Trump preferred a new leadership from within the regime that would be open to cutting a deal with the Americans and basically submitting to America's demands, dismantling the ballistic missile program, dismantling the nuclear program, cutting ties with the regional proxies, and also basically placing Iran squarely within the American sphere of influence in the region and the globe. However, of course, the absolute opposite happened, and new leadership has ascended to the supreme leadership in Iran that is, in America's view, a radical leadership, a leadership that will continue along the line of the previous supreme leader, Ali Khamenei, a leadership that will be defiantly opposed to any settlement with the United States that will entail any considerable concessions whatsoever, a leadership that might even be maximalist in its approach towards resisting the US and Israeli aggression, suicidal even. And of course, this puts the fate of the new leadership in jeopardy. President Trump, as you correctly pointed out, Rana, is disappointed with the choice of the new supreme leader. He claimed that he will have a say in selecting the new leader of Iran. Apparently, President Trump was basically delusional with his approach towards regime change in Iran. He thought that this would be a walk in the park, an easy picking, just like what happened in Venezuela. The situation in Iran, of course, is completely different. Iran's regime is much more complicated, much more entrenched within society, much more dogmatic in many ways, and will not be led or engineered by a foreign power like the US would like to imagine. So, of course, unfortunately, Rana, I believe that Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner are visiting Israel on Tuesday. Probably it will be to coordinate the next phase of the war and how this will be managed. And probably they will discuss the attempts to eliminate or liquidate the new leadership of Iran. So I hope Mojtaba Khamenei has the right security measures in place to prevent or avoid the fate of his father.
Yes, sir, because Israel has been continuously saying that it will assassinate the new leader. Professor De Silva, there are growing concerns that the conflict could expand beyond Iran and Israel, with attacks and tensions reported across the wider region rather. How real is the risk of this turning into a broader regional war?
It has already happened. And my point, what I was trying to explain to you, is that this is a missile and drone war. So it's not actually boots on the ground, soldiers fighting each other. This is incoming missiles and drones and the ability for interception. And the point that was made by the top expert in the United States is that this is not working. And therefore, Israel is going to get pummeled, and US bases in the whole region are going to get pummeled. And we have good information that the Fifth Fleet headquarters in Manama, in Bahrain, will not be rebuilt. They're within range of the short range missiles, the older missiles, not even the new hypersonic missiles. And therefore, this doesn't augur well because you've seen the Americans trying to coax the Kurds to attack from the north, and Israelis. There was an incursion recently by special forces, which was rebuffed by Hezbollah, and actually a helicopter was downed, and the second one was damaged. So there's a lot of action going on to show that it's regional, and also all the attacks on U.S. facilities in the Gulf region is for us to see, and also in Iraq and in Erbil and in many places. And the other thing is that all the radar stations, which actually are the eyes for the missiles, are being knocked out, and they're being knocked out by drones. And the point that was made by Professor Postol is that these attacks are accurate within 10 meters, which means this is certainly a problem which was not addressed by the United States defense establishment, and now it has come back to bite them. So this is a point that he had been arguing with the Pentagon for 35 years, but they thought better to continue with what they have, and that fallacy has been proven wrong by this current iteration of the war on Iran.
Dr. Osman, what's your take on Professor De Silva point of view or perspective?
I would partially agree with the dear professor. However, I do not believe that the situation is that simple, or that the United States is really that helpless in this calculus. Actually, according to many reports, the missile launches from Iran have decreased significantly over the past few days by 70 or 80%, according to some estimates. US official estimates go as far as 86%. That might be an exaggeration. However, they did. We can see and we can monitor how many missiles have been launched on a daily basis, how many drones, and they have significantly decreased. Maybe Iran is rationing its usage of missiles. Maybe it is also attempting to tactically maneuver and plan how they will use their stockpiles. And at the same time, of course, we do know for a fact that many missile launchers have been destroyed, that many missile stockpiles have been destroyed, and that many missile manufacturing facilities have been destroyed partially or completely by the American strikes as well. So the idea that Iran will be able to launch missiles and drones in perpetuity is not really something that is realistic, because the balance of power is completely in favor of the United States. We should not kid ourselves. Iran's military infrastructure has been devastated by this war. The civilian infrastructure already is being subjected, as we have seen with the attacks on the oil facilities to very, very strong attacks by the Israeli aggressors. And also, at the same time, we see that most of the military leadership of the country died in the opening hours and days of the war, and the supreme leader himself of Iran. So we should not really, of course, Iran is persevering, Iran is not collapsing, Iran is resisting strongly the US Israeli aggression. In my opinion, this is something that could be admirable, even. However, at the same time, we should not really get fooled by this and say that, oh, Iran is winning this war and the US is losing and the US is in a quagmire. No, that's not true. We did not reach that point yet. US casualties are very low at this point, 7 soldiers. I believe none of the US's naval assets have been destroyed. Most of those bases that are being pummeled by the Iranians in the Gulf states are bases that are not even operating against the Iranians, because the Gulf states have expressed their neutrality since before the beginning of this conflict, and there is no justification whatsoever to subjecting them to such acts of aggression by the Iranians. On the other hand, so the Iranians are being subjected to a U.S. American aggression, and on the other hand, they are carrying out aggression of their own against the Gulf states, not only targeting the U.S. bases, if that would be understandable, they're also targeting the civilian infrastructure of these countries, which is something that is worthy of condemnation, I believe. So even these bases, even if a raider, one raider here and one raider there, were destroyed or damaged, this doesn't really constitute anything that will tilt the balance of power on the ground. I'm no military expert, but I can sense a defeat when I see one. And of course, I'm not seeing one now. And the US is not really winning either, because President Trump's exit strategy from this war to declare a victory was to have a
Change
leadership
in
that
regime, sir?
yeah, to effect a change within the regime, not the entire regime. The idea that the regime would fall due to airstrikes is laughable. This is something that can never be achieved. Actually, never did such a situation occur without any ground invasion or ground operation, whether by the United States itself, for example, which is the attacking party here, or even a proxy on the ground, like a rebel force or a militia, which is not existent at the moment, and the regime is way too strong to be taken on by any non-state actor. They cannot really topple. A few Kurdish militias here and there cannot topple the regime. And also, the US, I don't believe, will actually embark upon a massive ground invasion of Iran, which would require hundreds of thousands of soldiers, and during which, of course, the US might actually get swamped into a quagmire and lose thousands of soldiers. And I do not
Got
see
your
this
point,
happening.
Dr. Osman. I'll leave you there. I'll leave this there, and I'll go to Professor De Silva. According to Axios, sir, U.S. is reportedly concerned after Israel targets Iranian fuel infrastructure. Could this development indicate that Israel is pursuing a broader military strategy than what Washington initially anticipated?
So the Americans were pushed into this. I mean, Netanyahu basically blackmailed President Trump to join the fight to attack the Iranians, and this is a tactic that Netanyahu used with Obama, with Biden, without success. So one of the American senators said he found an American president stupid enough to go along with his plan. So that's what has happened. But something I must say about following the mainstream media, because I have sources in the military who are on the ground, and they are saying that mainstream media is simply war propaganda, and there's no thorough, discernment and sifting of the facts on the ground, and that's what I'm actually trying to add to this program by giving you some of the military know-how and the technological flaws of the so-called missile defense strategy, which the expert, the undoubted expert, says is a massive fraud.
Professor De Silva, of course, you've added a lot militarily to the program. Dr. Osman, Iran's President Masoud Pezeshkian says the country must respond to attacks targeting Iranian territory. Does this signal a new phase of retaliation from Tehran, and how might that reshape the conflict militarily?
No, not really. They're already retaliating everywhere, and they're also retaliating against countries that never attacked them. So I don't think there is much room for any further escalation, at least within the surrounding region. Maybe if they attack more targets, if they focus on attempting to destroy more oil facilities in the Gulf, this would be a dangerous development, of course, if they attack Azerbaijan again, which might drag Azerbaijan into the war. And we do know that Iran and Azerbaijan have a very tense relationship historically due to the country's very close ties with Israel and the United States also as of late, and also because of the historical enmity about the who is the actual ruler of the Azeri population, because we have to understand that 2% of Iran's population are Azerbaijanis, ethnic Azerbaijanis. I mean, not actual nationals of the country of Azerbaijan. And also, if they attempt again to attack Turkey, this could drag NATO into the fray, and the war is already expanding. Some European powers like France and United Kingdom are participating in the war effort defensively to try to intercept Iranian drones and missiles, and probably even they might go on the offensive soon, especially with the rising energy prices due to the closure of the Straits of Hormuz by the Iranians, which has caused an energy a huge spike in energy prices, $118 per barrel, Rana. It is staggering to be and incomprehensible also. However, President Pezeshkian's statements also can be read that he is backtracking his previous statement. We have to understand that President Pezeshkian came out and said that he apologizes on account of the attacks on the regional Iran's neighbors, and and he pledged that his country will carry out no further attacks against its neighbors. And of course, what followed was the IRGC defiantly targeted Gulf countries with impunity, targeting Dubai, targeting Abu Dhabi, targeting Kuwait, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia. It was as if to signal and Qatar as well, to signal to the Iranian president that you have no power, you do not really control the military apparatus of the country, and what you are proposing is preposterous and will not be accepted by the country's military top brass. And apparently, of course, this is the camp that has elevated Mojtaba to the helm of Iran's leadership. The man is known for his very close ties with the IRGC. He was a volunteer in the IRGC back in the day, and he is known to adhere to the same hardline positions of his late father Ali Khamenei. So it seems that Pezeshkian, who represents maybe the moderate faction within the regime, is being completely sidelined right now and is towing the line and
Dr.
basically.
Osman, I'll be back again to ask you, why is the president at this point defied, and why isn't he, after he, of course, said sorry to all the neighbors, why is there why are the IRGC and of course the leaders, the new leaders or the clerics, defying the president? But I'll ask Professor De Silva. There are increasing concerns that the conflict could disrupt global energy markets and shipping routes in the Gulf. How serious is the risk that this war begins to affect global oil supplies and the wider global economy? And Dr. Osman, of course, just mentioned in his answer, of course, the prices of the oil.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be chaos in the world, economy, and part of the the strategy of the Iranians is to have maximum pain for everybody, including, consumers and voters in the United States, because we are seeing the gas prices go up at the pump. Now, one thing I must say that British military analysts have told me very clearly that Trump has no plan. And in fact, Senator Elizabeth Warren, after listening to the closed door, classified briefing for the Senate, she said, there is no plan. It is all lies. So we need to take those things into account as well, that there is no real plan, and therefore there is no exit strategy. And the fear is that a tactical nuke could be used by the Israelis because they're not really making headway, and they want to, Iran is not an existential threat for the Israelis. They are a strategic competitor, and that's something that everybody should be cognizant of. So these are things that we need to take into account, and the economic pain is going to affect everybody, from the Chinese. The people who are going to be very happy are the Russians. Putin is going to have more money coming in, and he's also having a diversion from the war in Ukraine. So I think the beneficiary are the Russians.
Okay, Dr. Osman, in 10 seconds, because I have to wrap up the episode now. Why are they defying the president?
IRGC defies the president because the president has no power per the constitution to control the military. The actual person who holds supreme executive authority and even paramount authority inside the Iranian system is the supreme leader of Iran. And the IRGC, of course, is the strong military arm of the regime, and it is the most prominent force in the state. And basically, they call the shots, and they are the power brokers, it seems, as highlighted by the elevation and selection of Mojtaba Khamenei, despite this being really to the detriment of the legitimacy of the regime on the long term.
Thank you very much, Professor P.L.D. Silva, Political Science and Strategic Studies Professor, and Dr. Mohammed Osman, our distinguished guests and International Relations Specialist. Thank you very much, both, for your in-depth analysis, insight, informative knowledge, and on top of all, your time. Thank you very much for being with us in this, of course, special extensive coverage of Q News. That brings us to the end of this special extensive coverage for this hour. And now we turn to our top stories with my dear colleague Salma Al-Faqi. Salma?
Thank you, Rana. And you're still watching Q News, bringing you the latest regional and international developments. And here are the top stories making headlines this hour. Egyptian President Abdel Fattah al-Sisi has warned that the region is passing through a difficult moment, expressing hope that the ongoing war ends quickly without spilling over to harm regional states or their citizens. And speaking at a police academy iftar attended by Prime Minister Mustafa Madbouli and Interior Minister Mahmoud Tawfiq, President al-Sisi cautioned that a prolonged crisis could trigger wider economic repercussions, particularly with expected rises in petroleum prices. Reflecting on lessons since 2011, the Egyptian president stressed the need for unity, awareness, and learning from past turmoil that saw several states collapse. President al-Sisi praised the Interior Ministry for restoring stability and combating terrorism and modernizing security institutions while highlighting the transformation of prisons into rehabilitation centers. He underscored that Egypt's security forces must maintain professionalism in dealing with citizens as the country navigates ongoing regional and economic challenges. And the Assembly of Experts in Iran has announced the appointment of Mojtaba Khamenei as the country's new supreme leader following the death of Ali Khamenei in recent US-Israeli strikes. And in a statement, the council said Mojtaba Khamenei was selected after extensive deliberations and an overwhelming vote, becoming Iran's third supreme leader. And the body urged Iranians to maintain unity and pledge allegiance to the new leader. And the announcement comes amid escalating regional tensions after joint US and Israeli attacks on Iran, which triggered Tehran's retaliatory operation, True Promise 4, targeting Israeli positions and US military bases in several Gulf states. And Israel's military says it carried out strikes on targets in central Iran on Monday, including internal security command centers and missile launch sites. And the Israeli military said it hit a rocket engine production facility, several long-range ballistic missile launch sites, and security facilities in the city of Isfahan, used by the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and the paramilitary Basij Force. It said the strikes were part of what it described as a phase aimed at deepening the damage to the core systems and foundations of the Iranian regime. And the announcement comes after Iran named Mojtaba Khamenei as the country's new supreme leader. And that brings us to the end of our top stories for now. And do stay with us for continued updates, expert analysis, and the latest developments right here on Q News.